I've gotta tell you folks, towards the beginning of this year I was feeling pretty meh about gaming overall. I mean, I would walk past my PS5 in the dead of night, prime gaming hours, and just, ugh. This new console generation was proving to be a bit of a slow burn, and not exactly in a good way. I'm a patient guy, but I had been waiting on a breakthrough, the one we all knew was bound to come eventually. Great games were being made, they just needed time. Apparently, 2023 was that time. In all my years of gaming, this one definitely contends for that top seat. Now, with all these amazing new titles to look back on, I figured it was a good opportunity to take a minute and appreciate, as well as critique, some of 2023's best. But before we get to the list, be sure to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching. I like the looks of Hexworks and CI Games' upcoming Souls-like prior to release. The current-gen visuals on Unreal Engine 5 and dual-world mechanic were right up my alley. Hot off the backs of Lies of P, I was hungry for a little more dodging, parrying, and posture breaking. Unfortunately, Lords of the Fallen released with unstable performance. The accursed lantern of the Dark Crusaders was capable of peering into the umbral plane, but it was also capable of really screwing with my frame rates. Combat was passable, but hindered badly by a lack of enemy variety. The careful consideration of From Software's array of games was simply nowhere to be found. However, the layout of this world, and its complex interconnectivity, managed to impress where other aspects had failed. It was fun to explore, to find loot, and discover new areas throughout Mornstead. There's promise here, but I think this one might have needed another half year to cook all in all. Balance patches and reworks have fired off at a blistering pace, however. While I didn't finish the game, I'm hopeful that, upon my return, there will be a better title waiting for me. All in all, Lords of the Fallen sits at a 6 out of 10 for the time being. Maybe in the future, that will change. Oh man, was I ever hyped over this one. The world, the boss battles, the music. Based on the preview marketing, this was shaping up to be an absolutely killer release. I really wish I could say that the newest addition to the Final Fantasy legacy matched my expectations, but it just didn't. While there was some great writing and, indeed, an amazing score, this game was a slog to play. An ambitious epic, utterly bogged down by mind-numbingly simple side quests and, perhaps even more egregiously, boring battles. Flashy and fast-paced, sure, but lacking in real challenge and substance. Also, I am standardly not one for skipping dialogue, but about halfway through this game, I started to resent just how much of a chatterbox literally everyone I came across ended up being. I don't know how you can turn a request for a bag of beans into a 3-minute dialogue, but that's exactly what this game did time and time again. While there was some amazing cutscene acting, huge visual spectacle, and impeccably detailed facial rendering, some of the core flaws of this title really dragged it down. After about 40 hours, with high points and low points abound, I put the controller down for greener pastures. While there's a lot to appreciate, Final Fantasy XVI receives a 6.5 out of 10 out of me. Looting and shooting has always been a favorite pastime of mine. You know, I don't mean to be one of those people, but I am a Destiny 1 beta player after all, so obviously my opinion on these things is way more valid than most. Lightfall, the latest Destiny 2 expansion, arrived earlier on in the year, and honestly, I wasn't nearly as harsh a critic concerning this release as a lot of others seem to be. Of course, I had a fire team to join me through the legendary campaign, so that may have contributed a bit to my personal enjoyment. There were some annoying characters and nonsense sci-fi MacGuffins, absolutely, but I've dealt with all that before in other titles too. The truth is, I was here for one thing, and one thing alone. The gameplay on those shiny new subclasses. For all the criticism Bungie has taken over the content of Lightfall's campaign, I can't fault them for a single second over the addition of the Strand subclasses. It looks great, and it feels great too. A new level of mobility was put on the table, and I dug right in. For around 80 hours, I had a great time swinging about Neomuna's neon-lit cityscape. The campaign proved sufficiently challenging too, and it felt pretty satisfying to conquer in the end. Still, I can recognize a stopgap when I see one. It definitely wasn't one of Bungie's all-time greatest, but I don't think it was quite as bad as it's often put out to be. A solid 7 out of 10 overall. Dead Island 2 had a notoriously rocky development cycle. After 8 years of bouncing between different devs, the sequel to the 2011 original finally arrived in April of this year. In the end, the folks at Dambuster Studio managed to somehow beat the odds over the head with a spiked baseball bat, surprising almost everyone with an entirely competent and entertaining release. First off, before you ask yourself, amidst all the great games this year, is Dead Island 2 really worth it? You also have to question, are zombies still fun to kill? Because if the answer to the latter is yes, the same absolutely rings true of the former. Personally, I am not tired of killing zombies. It's just a thing for me. And that's what Dead Island 2 delivers in spades, and mallets and swords, and thankfully guns too. Admittedly, there isn't much depth here. And there isn't much to be said for the story either, which was suitably corny at best. But you will be hacking and slashing and bashing your way through a whole lot of undead, and that, at least, is done rather well. Between the graphics, the brutal and bloody melee, and the surface-level yet satisfying RPG progression, there was a lot to enjoy during my time in Hell A. I do have my fair share of complaints about this one, though. While compact and well-designed, the smaller open-world levels feel distinctly last-gen. Also, the choice to leave a ton of plot threads entirely unresolved with the promise of some undeserved Avengers-esque sequel or DLC does no favors for this title. I mean, honestly guys, there's no need for a season pass here. Dead Island 2 would have probably scored even higher on this list if it had felt like a complete, self-contained experience, but sadly, it stumbles during the last leg in this regard. Still, I had my fill over the course of a 30-hour playthrough, and a 7.5 out of 10 isn't bad at all for a game which many doubted would ever release in the first place. Like I had said before, my gaming interests were about as dead as the USG Ishimura's head security officer towards the start of the year, but they were bound to be resurrected at some point or another. Well, that came in the form of the Dead Space remake. One of my favorite survival horror experiences was being rebuilt from the ground up, and I wasn't going to miss out on a chance to return to Isaac's skin-crawling adventures. The developers, Motive Arts, promised all sorts of improvements leading up to the release. Expanded levels and seamless exploration, all without a single loading screen. Finally, the twisting halls and shadowy maintenance chambers of the infamous USG Ishimura could be fully realized and actually feel like a real, logical ship layout too. The necromorphs, who still chart amongst the freakiest video game enemies ever made, were rendered in more horrifying detail than ever. And the combat got a big upgrade, with a flesh-stripping system which was equally as gory as it was satisfying. However, I'm not sure if the devs changed too much or maybe too little with this one. While I thoroughly enjoyed my time with the Dead Space remake, some of these newer features certainly landed better than others. In particular, the Intensity Director, which was proposed to offer all sorts of dynamic scenarios during your time aboard the ship, may have been a bit too subtle for my tastes. Not only that, but an early rendering bug made for some pretty janky graphics, at least for the first 6 hours of my playthrough. Fortunately, that issue was resolved rather quickly. After a brief 13-hour campaign, I put Dead Space down for the time being. I'm thinking a well-deserved 8 out of 10. I hardly regretted my purchase, but there were even greater releases creeping just around the corner. Ranking as perhaps the greatest surprise this year, I always thought Lies of P looked more like a tech demo than an actual, fully realized game. I was more than happy to be proven dead wrong. With a compelling and original setting, a menagerie of enemies and weapons to take them on with, along with some of the most intense boss fights I've ever experienced in the Souls genre to this date, my expectations were thoroughly shattered. The city of Krot and surrounding countryside made for an excellent battleground as I cleaved my path through monsters and puppets alike. While I initially thought the early game was overly punishing, I realized a bit of a weapon switch-up would make a major difference. The handle and blade combination system made for some interesting experimentation. And in time, I would come to love the combat, which relied on smart positioning and split-time reactions to get those sweet, sweet, perfect parries. After an excruciating and intense boss rush of a finale, I dive straight into New Game Plus, racking up a full 50 hours of quality action. Since that time, a few rebalance patches have released, and I expect my inevitable return to Lies of P will be all the more enjoyable for it. While I don't believe this game quite reaches the heights of its From Software inspirations, it does an admirable job in pretty much every regard. So far as Souls-like titles are concerned, the devs at NeoWiz Games and Round 8 Studio have officially proven themselves. That's an excellent 8.5 out of 10, and I can't wait to see their next project. I remember seeing the trailer for Spider-Man 2 and thinking, this is, without a doubt, the most amazing thing I've ever seen. Insomniac was not apt to disappoint. Their non-stop pace of quality releases has been unmatched this generation. The original 2018 Spider-Man had already left its mark, and with Venom finally on the scene, this was a surefire hit. Ultimately, Spider-Man 2 exceeded my expectations. Here, I think we're finally seeing the PS5 in full swing. New York City had been expanded and populated with huge crowds, as well as dense traffic. Ray-traced reflections brought the presentation up to new heights, and the 40 frames per second graphics quality mode made for some truly mind-blowing visuals. Here, the spectacle of the fights was reaching the likes of Final Fantasy XVI, but the fights were actually fun. Now, naturally, I'm a big Spider-Man fan. I know pretty much everybody kind of is, but not everybody runs a comic book store. I love a classic Spidey story. I love his rogues gallery, and his allies. So I was delighted to find that these Spider-Men may have been my favorite rendition of the characters in years. The plot was on overdrive. It never stopped ramping up the action, and the stakes. It was a wild ride through and through. However, after a relatively short 23-hour road to the Platinum Trophy, I was left with very little reason to continue playing, other than to experience that incredible story once again. A new difficulty unlocks after you beat the campaign, but this is no New Game Plus. Instead, I'll be waiting for the inevitable DLC and other add-ons before I come crawling back to this one. Spider-Man 2 receives a spectacular 9 out of 10 from me. I knew the Resident Evil 4 remake was going to be a day one purchase on my part. That's all thanks to the original release, which never fails to bring about some nostalgic memories. This castle-romping, cult-slaying, bass fishing simulator still reigns supreme, the undeniable king of its particular gaming niche. I thought the best I could hope for was a return to those memories, but in higher definition. What I received was so much more. It is plainly obvious that every single detail of this remake was sculpted with such love and passion, from iconic weapons, encounters, and set pieces, to the new and unexpected reimagining of familiar boss fights and side characters. The graphics and sound design were stunning. The new voice acting landed better than ever. That's no easy feat, by the way. It's a very campy script. But one which is given full justice in this case. Also, a new knife deflection and durability mechanic was introduced, which felt like a perfectly well-considered and suitable addition to the game, which by most other means was a faithful adaptation. Agent Leon Kennedy was back in full roundhouse kicking swing. I enjoyed every second of heart-pounding, over-the-shoulder action. There isn't a single moment of the RE4 remake that feels wasted. Not only that, its short and sweet campaign is ripe for replayability, with all sorts of unlockable bonuses ready and waiting for dedicated players. Actually, over the course of about 30 hours, I did a double playthrough back-to-back, and I'd gladly do it again in the future. Being one of the year's best, I'd rate the Resident Evil 4 remake at a 9.5 out of 10. I've already mentioned From Software twice in this video, which makes it all the more interesting that their latest release does not fall under the genre they themselves pioneered. I did not anticipate delving into the high-octane world of mechs and mercenaries which makes up Armored Core, but I'm glad as hell I made the choice to do so. While I'm definitely an amateur so far as the mecha genre is concerned, Armored Core 6 offered enough familiar mechanics that I was willing to give it a try. By the end, I had a new personal favorite. From the mission structure to the mech customization, this game was firing on all cylinders. I found myself absorbed by the gripping plot, life or death battles, and hours tweaking my build in the garage. One of the most appealing aspects of Armored Core 6 was the variation of playstyles based on your AC's choice of legs. For example, while a quadruped type can achieve sustained flight, a tank-treaded build tears across the ground, drifting at high speeds. Over the course of 3 playthroughs, during which I saw every ending, I was continually surprised and entertained by all the different options I had to tackle any challenge presented throughout the experience. And there were a lot of varied missions in this game. Also, I managed to rack up another set of bragging rights, having bashed my head against pre-nerf versions of bosses until victory was mine. Yeah, I'm that guy again. Anyway, Armored Core scores at a 9.5 out of 10. An undeniably well-polished, well-produced, and fun game. There is something to be said for saving the best for last, right? I'm a huge D&D fan. In fact, I run the game for a living. My personal bar was set as high as it could go following Baldur's Gate 3's full release. It was in Larian Studios' hands to vault that bar, and they managed to do so handily. Classic RPGs are not exactly known for their graphics. In fact, I had played through a decent chunk of 2002's Neverwinter Nights recently. Those chunky, low-poly models did not dampen the experience, but Baldur's Gate 3 wrenched that up to another level entirely. The motion capture used in cutscenes is impeccable, and the texture quality throughout the whole game space really doubled down on my immersion. Perhaps an underrated feature of the game is its verticality. Classic RPGs are known to be rather flat, all in all. But in Baldur's Gate 3, you can jump. Actually, you can fly, too. This made for a unique, impressively multi-layered exploration experience. I have no doubt that I missed all sorts of secrets during my journeys, and that's a good thing. Add a phenomenal soundtrack, as well as unmatched character performances. On top of all that, and you have an instant winner on my part. With an expansive campaign, which can easily reach over 100 hours long, and nigh endless character building options, I will likely be returning to Baldur's Gate 3 for years to come. Of all 2023's great games, this one comes out on top. A true 10 out of 10. Thanks again for listening, and be sure to like and subscribe for more Freakopolis content. We'll catch you next time.